So, when I say Harlem Renaissance, what's the first thing that pops in your head? Is it jazz clubs, Langston Hughes, this amazing explosion of art and culture? Yeah, it was absolutely all of that. But simmering just beneath the surface of this incredible cultural boom was something way more intense, a full-blown intellectual war for the very soul of Black America. Right, so was this era just one big, glamorous party, a time when, as Langston Hughes put it, the Negro was in vogue? Or was it a high-stakes battleground of ideas? That's the question we're really digging into here, because the real story, believe me, is so much deeper than the speakeasies and the poetry. Because, you see, beyond all the art and music and literature, this was a time defined by these fierce, competing blueprints for the future. This wasn't just about creating beautiful things. It was about trying to answer the biggest questions imaginable. What does it actually mean to be Black in America? And what is the real path to liberation? So how did we even get to this point? I mean, this incredible explosion of thought and creativity didn't just appear out of thin air. It was forged in the crucible of some massive historical changes. Let's take a look at the forces that actually created this new Negro.
Okay, so you've got to picture these three massive forces all hitting at the same time. First, the Great Migration. We're talking millions of people leaving the brutal Jim Crow South, which was as much a psychological escape as a physical one. Then you have 350,000 Black soldiers coming back from World War I. They fought for democracy overseas, and now they're back home demanding those same rights with a whole new sense of militancy. And finally, you have Harlem itself becoming this Black Mecca, a place where Southern migrants, Caribbean immigrants, artists, and thinkers all converge for the first time. You put all that together, and boom, you have the perfect storm for a revolution of ideas. And right at the heart of this revolution were three intellectual giants, each one offering a radically different blueprint for the future of the race. We're talking about W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, and Alain Locke.
First up, you have the absolute titan of an intellectual, W.E.B. Du Bois, the first African-American to get a PhD from Harvard, no less. His entire philosophy was built around trying to solve this really complex, painful problem that he famously identified. And this is it, the core of his entire worldview: double consciousness. Just try to imagine constantly seeing yourself through the eyes of a society that despises you. That's the feeling he's describing, this internal tug-of-war of being both Black and American, but never really being allowed to be fully one or the other. For Du Bois, healing this two-ness was the central challenge. The goal was to make it possible to be both, without having to compromise and without being cursed and spit upon. So how do you solve a problem that big? Well, for Du Bois, the answer lay in his famous strategy of the talented tenth. His idea was that the top 10% of the Black community, the most educated, the most brilliant, the exceptional men, had a duty to lead the way, to pull the rest of the race up by fighting for political and civil rights. It was a very top-down, intellectual-led approach. But then, onto the scene in Harlem storms this powerful and incredibly charismatic counterforce, Marcus Garvey. A Jamaican immigrant, Garvey looked at the exact same racial landscape in America and came to a completely, and I mean completely, different conclusion.
To Garvey, integration was a silly idea, a total non-starter. For him, the only path forward was Black nationalism and racial separatism. His vision wasn't just about Harlem or even America, it was global. He wanted to unite every person of African descent on the planet into one powerful political and economic force, with the ultimate goal of reclaiming Africa as a global power. He wasn't trying to find a place for Black people in America, he wanted to build an entirely new world for them.
And this quote right here, it gets to the absolute heart of Garvey's focus on economic power. He knew that political rights meant nothing without economic independence. So he launched businesses like the Negro Factories Corporation and, most famously, the Black Star Line Shipping Company. These weren't just businesses. They were powerful symbols of Black capability and the actual tools for building a self-sufficient global nation. Okay, so then you have a third way, a much more subtle path offered by the philosopher Alain Locke, who's often called the father of the Harlem Renaissance. Locke's strategy wasn't about direct political fights or building a new nation somewhere else. It was something different altogether. What Locke was saying was, hey, look around, a huge psychological shift is already happening. He argued that the old Negro, a caricature created by white society, was being replaced by the new Negro. Think of it like a spiritual emancipation, a shedding of that old skin of implied inferiority, and replacing it with a powerful new self-respect. For Locke, this wasn't some far-off goal. It was happening right now. and art was its purest expression. And this is where his philosophy gets really interesting, especially when you compare it to someone like Du Bois. Locke was against using art as a political weapon. He basically said that if you're only making propaganda, you're still letting your oppressor define the terms of the conversation. Instead, he believed that by creating art that was just excellent, that had universal human appeal, Black artists could prove the value of their unique culture and build a bridge to the rest of the world, achieving a kind of equality through mutual respect.
So you can imagine, with these three powerful, totally different visions swirling around in the same place at the same time, things were bound to get heated. And they did. The first and most explosive clash was this battle between integration and separatism.
And what's so fascinating is how it all comes back to Du Bois's idea of double consciousness. You see, Du Bois was trying to heal that internal fracture within the American nation. Garvey's solution? Just surgically remove the American part of the problem altogether and forge a new, whole identity completely outside of it. They were two fundamentally different answers to the exact same core problem. This table just lays out their differences so clearly. I mean, look at the primary strategy. Du Bois is all about politics and law. Garvey is focused on economic nationalism. Locke is all about art and culture. Their leadership models couldn't be more different either. Du Bois is elite, talented 10th. Garvey is the single, charismatic leader of the masses. And Locke's bet on an artistic elite. And then the role of art? For Du Bois, it's propaganda. For Garvey, a tool for pride. And for Locke, a bridge to understanding. Just worlds apart. And let me tell you, this feud was not some polite academic debate. It got personal. It got ugly. Du Bois went after Garvey's character and his businesses in the ANACP's magazine, and Garvey fired back, hitting on these really raw nerves of class and colorism, calling Du Bois and the ANACP a light-skinned mulatto elite that was disconnected from the working class. He even called Du Bois a white man's nigger. This was a brutal fight. Now, besides that huge integration versus separatism fight, there was another major battle raging, and this one was for the soul of the art itself. It really pitted the older guard against this rebellious younger generation of artists who were asking a really fundamental question. What is Black art even for? And this whole debate was just perfectly captured in these two competing essays. On one side, you have the critic George Schuyler, who wrote an essay basically saying the whole idea of Black art is hokum, just nonsense. He argued Black Americans are just Americans, so their art is just American art. And then Langston Hughes claps back with his own legendary essay, arguing that the only path to real, authentic art was to dive deep and embrace the unique culture of the Black working class. The jazz, the blues, the laughter, all of it. And this quote from Hughes's essay, wow, this was a declaration of artistic independence. It was a mic drop. Hughes and his whole generation were basically saying, we are done. We are no longer going to create art to please white patrons or to fit into some respectable box that the Black elite wants for us. We are going to express our dark-skinned selves without fear or shame. And if you don't like it, we honestly don't care. So, who won? Which of these grand visions for the future actually came out on top? Well, the truth is, none of them. Not really. Garvey's movement eventually collapsed. Locke's beautiful dream of achieving equality through art alone just wasn't enough. And even Du Bois, much later in his life, began to seriously question his own integrationist strategy. So if nobody won, what's the takeaway? The real, lasting legacy of the Harlem Renaissance isn't a final answer. It's the debate itself. It's the powerful, unresolved questions. These tensions between integration and separatism, between elite and grassroots leadership, between art as a weapon and art as a bridge, these became the foundational questions for Black America. You can see their echoes all the way through the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power movement, and they are still animating conversations about racial justice today. The Harlem Renaissance essentially set the terms of the debate that every generation since has had to wrestle with. Which brings us to our final thought here. These huge, fundamental debates about identity, about strategy, about the right path to liberation, they weren't settled 100 years ago. Are they really settled now?